Lead meeting.
Okay, and with that, again, we welcome Rabbi Baruch Simon. We wish we could be with you in person, but we are so glad that you are here. Rabbi Simon is a Rosh Yeshiva at RITZ and YU. Formal title of his file is the Eternal.
You hate it already?
Yes. We can hear you. Yes. The Colonel Yechiel Eliachar Professor of Talmud. Rabbi Simon is, I'll make it personal. I'm not going to read a formal bio. He's such an incredible teacher because he explains things simply. He does halacha, he does chassidut, he does musar. It's a full picture of Judaism, one that isn't overly intellectualized or isn't under-intellectualized. It has the breadth of so many saints and scholars. When you're in Rabbi Simon's shir, you hear stories about Gedolim, giants who he consults on questions of Jewish law, and you appreciate that you're learning from a master, but also a connected master, someone who gets Amcha, knows how it is in the shuls and on the street for Jews trying to do Jewish law, knows the scholarship in and out, has considered the lamdos and the learning of it, and has consulted with experts in the field. And it's an incredible privilege to learn from Rabbi Simon. It's for those who love Torah, it's sweet and it's a dream. And so that dream is one that's real for us tonight. So we're so grateful, again, for the Schechters primarily, and to others for making it possible, and to Rabbi Simon for being with us. So Rabbi Simon, thank you. You are live.
Okay, thank you. Should we put on the screen? Is the screen on? Can you see me?
We could see you before, but now we don't. But either way is good. Now we see you. Perfect.
Yeah,
Oh.
In other words, it goes on, but it goes back off.
That's correct. Spend 1 minute and get that. See. Oh.
Yeah. 1 second, we're trying to work out technical details.
That's
here.
fine. That's good.
Oh.
Okay.
Okay.
Perfect.
Zecher Nishmas Avi Mori Yaakov Ben Yisrael Pinchas, Zecher Nishmas Dan and Neil Hasheda Basri Yeshua Falak. Good evening, everybody. Did you hear me and see me? Okay. Yeah. First, Reshus Lemor the Asra Ravi Dallinger. I want to thank you for inviting me once again to share Divrei Torah in this lovely community of Rhode Island. I would like to thank the Dr. and Mr. Schechter for sponsoring this event, amongst others who will be perhaps mentioned next week. It's always a very pleasant Shabbos that I have in Rhode Island to meet the various people, to spend Shabbos together, the Suda Shabbos together. So unfortunately, this year, as the circumstances have it, we are unable to actually be there, but our hearts are still binded together. And I'm so grateful to Rabbi Dallinger and the Schechters and others in the community to be able to continue our relationship in the sharing of Divrei Torah together. And even in hard times, as we're facing now, we're still able to have our annual shir together. And as I always tell people, feel free to interact. I don't like to give just a lecture. I like to interact with everybody. So feel free to do so if you want to raise an issue or something like that, and we'll be happy to discuss it. The topic of the shiurim is regarding the laws of mikveh and the construction of mikveh, and especially the challenges that exist in this time of the coronavirus, specifically regarding the mikveh. So let us discuss some basic ideas in the mikveh. Feel free to interject or ask, and it always can enhance the shir by everyone's participation. We know that the Torah tells us in Parsha Shmini, in Vayikra. Unfortunately, this whole Vayikra, we were not in shul. We mamish completed the whole Sefer Vayikra with our absence from the regular service. And Parsha Shmini is one of the Parshias, which is the Parsha that mentions the Mikveh Boru Mikveh Mayim Yetohor. That we have two types of mikvahs. One is called a bore, a pit, which is filled with rainwater. It's a mikveh mayim. It's full with rainwater, and that is a source of a mikveh, meaning you would dig into the ground, you would make a big enough hole into the ground that a human being could fit standing up, and then water would just rain in, and you would have a cavity in the ground which would service as a mikveh. That's one way of dealing with a mikveh. The other way, the Torah tells us, is to dig beneath the ground until you hit water. And in most cases, we would consider the water meimayon, water of a spring. And if it's far enough from other sources of water, that would be considered a spring water, and the spring water itself would serve as a source of mikveh water. So those are the two ways that you can get mikveh water. You can get mikveh water from shamayim, from the Mei Geshamim, or you can get mikveh water from the ground, from the Aretz. And that's called Mei Mayim, spring water. We also consider an ocean to be spring water. So that could also be a source of water for a mikveh. So it seems very simple. Just either dig or go to the ocean or wait till it rains and you'll have your mikveh. So what's the problem? What's the complexity? The complexity is that we live in a generation where cleanliness is a high priority. Although the standard of cleanliness, say, generations and generations ago, were probably not the same standard as we have today. So if one would just dig a pit into the ground, have a cavity in the ground, and have it and wait and have the rainwater fill up, after several people using it, the mikveh water would no longer be too appealing for anybody to use, and that would be a problem for people's wanting to use such a body of water. This is without the corona, without any special viruses, just without that. People would be very adverse to wanting to do that. You see, when you have a mikveh for the kalim, for the utensils that you bought from a non-Jew, the metal or glass, so then you could have a body of rainwater for some time, and the utensils probably won't complain too much, and we could get away with, using them, that body of water for a longer amount of time than human beings will put up with that. So what do we do? What do we do? How do we maintain this halacha? So if we can tell everyone, just go to the ocean is a mayan. It's considered like spring water, but it's not necessarily the easiest situation to go to the ocean and to be there, and it has to be with the proper privacy, and it's not necessarily the easiest way of dealing with it. So what do we do? So what we do is we use tap water from the faucet. Now, tap water is a problem. Why is tap water a problem? Because any water that we discussed, the rainwater, we discussed the spring water, but once that water was situated in a vessel, in a kli, in a tank, in a water tank, it's called mayim she'uvim. And mayim she'uvim is what? Is not valid for the mikveh. Meaning, once the water was in a vessel, was in a tank, or within some type of kli, even though it no longer is in that vessel anymore, the water is disqualified for being used for the mikveh. So we can't just turn on the faucet and say, let's use the faucet water. And the faucet water is very good because we get a fresh supply whenever we want. And therefore we can't do that. There is a minority view that is not the accepted view, that permits using the tap water as mikveh water, but it's not usually the accepted view. Now, what's the basis of this view? The basis of this view is that that the water tank that it was in is connected to the ground, and it's made to service the ground, and perhaps something that's made into the ground is not considered a vessel to disqualify the water. Whereas if I had something that's not made to be part of the ground, then perhaps then that would make the water disqualified if the water went into it. But if it was something that was nasa to be with the ground, maybe that was what is not considered a vessel to disqualify the water. In fact, many years ago, there was a rabbi, I believe in the San Francisco area, and you can look on your called Rabbi David Miller, and he wrote, what is it, The Secret of a Jew? You can look it up in your phones and your Googles or whatever you have there. Rabbi David Miller. You have it? And basically what this Rabbi David Miller tried to accomplish was to make a mikveh that people who are not apt to go to a public mikveh will go. And he basically, what he did was, you make in the wall, in the corner of your room, you have a faucet, and basically you put up walls around it, leaning on the floor, like the old telephone booths. And you would turn it on, you would fill the water up, and you'd have your mikveh with what? With this water that just came in fresh. And you'd have your own private mikveh in your own home. Did anyone find the book?
Yeah, I put the link in the chat here, actually. The Secret of the Jew by David Miller. Yes.
Yeah, and it's interesting, and it's it's fascinating, but it's not the accepted mainstream way that because basically his whole assumption is that the tap water is good, and we assume that even though the water was in a water tank or things like that, that will disqualify the water. And he said he was following a very minority opinion that permitted it, and today that opinion is not the accepted view. He was trying to facilitate the mikveh use for people who, again, were not apt to go to the mikveh in a public mikveh. They would just have the privacy of their home. So therefore, the assumption that we have today, the normative psak that we have today, is that any tap water was coming from a water tank is disqualified to be used for the mikveh. So now we go back to our original problem. Our original problem is, how do we get the water? I mean, we say it rains, good. We get water from underneath. But that rainwater, after a couple of nights, see, if you live in a big hustling, bustling community where there's 100 people a night going, in a night or two, it's not so. Imagine you have 100 people who already have been in that pool of water before you. It's not the most. So what possibilities therefore are there? So the standard way, and again, there's a lot of is like this. And of course, mikveh construction is a very complex undertaking. I was just speaking to my friend Rav Nachum Rosenberg, who goes all over the world making mikvos. The people, basically, that could be your life profession, building mikvos all over the world. And there are people who I know that is their life profession. Someone wanted me to go into that at one point, but I didn't think chinuch and mikveh building would be compatible, because mikveh building is basically you're on the plane going from country to city to country, all the time, and the upkeep and the building, it's hard to be a rebbe in yeshiva and a mikveh builder in the same lifetime. So I opted for the chinuch track over the mikveh building track. But there are people and we need these people, because every community needs to have it, and therefore there are people that devote their lives and their parnasa to to this enterprise. So one way of doing it is the following. Basically, we build a structure in the ground with two cavities and a wall in between. One cavity has pure, pristine rainwater that was collected on the roof of the building and went into a pipe that is not susceptible for contamination, for tumah, and it collects in that cavity. The rainwater is staying there. Then we have another cavity, which the tap water comes in. Two different cavities with a wall in between, side by side. And there's a hole in the wall. And the two waters, the rainwater and the tap water, meet in that hole. That's called the nekav hashaka. Hashaka is from the lashon nishika, kissing. It's as if the waters kiss each other. They meet each other in the hole, and that halacha, and the hole is, Rav Nachum Rosenberg said, the Chazon Ish said it's a little less than 2 inches, and the Satmar Rebbe said around 3 inches. This mikveh construction maker, Rabbi Rosenberg, makes it 4 inches. There are different opinions of how big the hole should be. But basically, what the two waters meet, and when the two waters meet, that's called hashaka. That's called the meeting of two different waters, the rainwater and the tap water. The tap water could have been rainwater also, but it went into a kli. It was in a water tank. So now it's no good. But now that the pristine rainwater, which never went into a kli, because even the pipe that went through from the roof down is made in a way that it's not a kli, it's not a receptacle. It can't really hold anything. And the two waters meet, and then the waters are the tap water is halachically considered rainwater now. In other words, whatever problem it had because it was in the water tank now is removed because it touches the rainwater. And that's called hashaka. So what do we gain by this? What we gain by this is that every night, if we want, at the end of the day, at the end of the night where people used it, we can now plug up the hole. We can take the tap water out. We can suck it out, so to speak, dry that cavity, and refill it with new, fresh tap water. And then unplug, and the waters will meet again for the next bunch of people who are going to use it. And here we're able to maintain fresh water on a constant basis. Now, I don't say that every mikveh empties out the water every night, but it could potentially, upon the need, could be replenished, and hence the water stays clean. So the person who's going never really goes into the cavity of the real rainwater. They're going into the tap water, which is converted, which constantly replenishes, as often as that particular mikveh has the ability and staff to fill it up, to empty it out and fill it up. Many mikvahs can't do it at least on a regular, on a daily basis. So depending upon the community and the resources of the community, of how often the water could be replenished. And that was one of the classical ways, of the original ways of building a mikveh, with the concern of the hygiene, and today also people use chlorine in the mikveh, so to maintain a certain standard of hygiene and health, and especially in this time where people are having a lot of difficulty and challenge by going to the mikveh. Some people, it's a nightmare. Some people have declared that until the corona is over, they don't want to, get anywhere near the mikveh. And this is a challenge. It's a challenge for the community. It's a challenge for the Rabbanim. It's a bigger challenge as a challenge for the women. It's a challenge on many levels. There's another way of building the mikveh, and that is not to have. This is called the hashaka approach. Then there's a zriya approach, which is, again, you'll also have two cavities, but instead of the two waters coming in from two different sides, the rainwater from one side, the tap water from the other side, the way it goes is they fill it up first with rainwater, and then the tap water comes in afterwards and overflows into the other cavity. One of the advantages is that if a person forgets to pull the plug, you see, every time you fill up a mikveh, you plug it because you don't want the old rainwater to leave. Then you have to remember, when you refill it, to take out the plug to do the connection, because if you forget, then your mikveh is highly problematic, and we don't want to rely on the opinion necessarily that says that tap water alone is good, because the whole expense that we have of building a mikveh is assuming that tap water is not good, and therefore we need new supply of tap water whenever to connect to the rainwater and do this hashaka or this zriya, and therefore that's the whole expense of the mikveh. The fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe was the Rebbe Rashab, Beth Sholom Ber. He was the fifth Rebbe. We know the seven Rebbes of Chabad, and Chabad started with the Alter Rebbe, the Baal HaTanya, and then the Mittler Rebbe was the second Rebbe, then the Tzemach Tzedek was the third Rebbe, the Marash was the fourth, the Rashab, Rav Sholom Ber was the fifth Rebbe, the sixth Rebbe was the Rayatz, and the seventh Rebbe was the Rebbe of this generation of Reb Menachem Mendel Schneerson Zatzal. And the Rashab made a new contribution to Hilchas Mikveh. What was his contribution? So he said like this. You see, there is an opinions that say that even though we make a hashaka and we constantly replenish the water, but we want to have a certain percentage of pristine rainwater, not converted rainwater. So the problem is, anytime you have hashaka, you have the wall divided between the two cavities and the hole in the wall. Every time a human being, now we also follow the opinion that there is a machlokus about this, whether once you unplug the hole and the water's meet, can you now plug it up and we say that the water was converted and now it's good? Or no, we need the hole to be open, when the woman is being tovel in the mikveh. So we're machmir to keep the hole open. Now, because there is an opinion that says that the water is only considered converted from the tap water to the rainwater as long as the hole is open. Once you plug up the hole, then the tap water goes back to being tap water, which is not good. Now, men who use the mikveh on Erev Rosh Hashanah and Erev Yom Kippur will very often, if they use the same mikveh that women use, will very often see that the plug is plugged up when they go. And that's why, because the men's idea of going is just a minhag, and therefore we don't want the water to get mixed for the men. So for the men, we plug up the hole before they go. But for the women, the plug is open. The plug is open. We always, and if you never opened the plug and you've refilled it, that's a big problem because you didn't convert the water. If you opened it and then shut it again, that's a machlokas, but whether it converts back, and we are machmir to always, for the women, the plug should always be opened when they're going, so the two waters are converging and meeting at that time. But the problem is, since we follow this opinion and we leave the plug open, so anytime a human being comes in to the mikveh, the weight of the body is going to displace the waters are going to mix. See, if we would plug it up after we refilled it, then nothing would happen. Then the waters would stay. But since we don't do that, we unplug the mikveh, and when the people go, it's open. So that means every time a person's going, the displacement of the body is causing the waters to go back and forth. And after who knows how many times or how many years, how much real pristine rainwater do you have? And there is a Chumash Shita that is brought down in the Shach that says that you have to have around 51% of the mikveh should have the real pristine, not the converted water, but the real rainwater that was not converted through hashaka. So that causes a problem with this idea. So the Lubavitcher Rebbe, the fifth Rebbe, came up with a new way of building a mikveh. And this was his idea. He says, don't build a mikveh the way I described it to you, two cavities in the ground, and then a wall in between and a hole in the wall. Don't do it that way. You know what he said? And that's why Rav Nachum Rosen reported out, the Chabad mikvahs are very convenient to build. That's why in many communities, there's a regular mikveh, and then if there's a Chabad community there or a Chabad house there, they'll want to build their own mikveh, which is easier to build. It's a cheaper way of building, but it could be very helpful. And that is like this: build one cavity in the ground, one cavity, not two cavities, and then fill the cavity with real rainwater. Not fill, but let it has to. You can't. In other words, you can't take a fill it with a kli, with a vessel, and then pour it in. That's no good. In other words, the construction of mikveh, the waters have to go in by themselves without any human intervention. Because if there's human intervention, it parcels the whole mikveh. So what the Lubavitcher Rebbe said to do was to let the rainwater come in. Okay. Then, on top of the rainwater, build your floor. And in the floor, there'll be a hole. And then put the tap water on top of the floor. And then the hashaka, instead of the water, the hole being in a erect wall between the two cavities, as we discussed originally, the hole will be in the floor, and there'll be the rainwater on the pristine rainwater on the bottom of the floor, and the tap water on top of the floor, and the waters will meet in the hole, which is not in a wall, but in the floor. And what do you gain by that? Because you gain by that because the tap water that where the women go, is going to be hot water. The rainwater is going to be underneath the ground, is cold. The heat will rise. So the mixture of the waters will be much less. It will take much longer of a time till they really mix and be problematic that you're losing your pristine water than the other way of doing it by building a wall and having the two waters coming in from two different sides, and then the hole in the middle of the wall. Here, the hole will be what? In the floor. The rainwater will be underneath. The tap water will be on top. But the same idea of hashaka will exist instead of side by side, one on top of the other. And the hope is that the pristine rainwater will stay for a much longer time. And certainly because the rainwater is on the bottom, it's cold. The tap water is heated, it will be hot, and the heat will rise, and there will be a much longer time where you'll have the pristine rainwater on the bottom. And that's called bor al gabe bor. And that was the chiddush of the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe. Now, it's easier to build this mikveh, as Rav Nachum Rosenberg pointed out, because it's one cavity. It's not like the two cavities where you have the wall in between. So it's especially you're going out of town and you need to build a mikveh, and the community doesn't necessarily have the resources. So that is a good mikveh. Like everything in life, there was controversy about it. Some want to say that just like the Gemara, the Mishnah says that if you have water on a slope, that water is not considered connected one to the other. So maybe if you have one on top of the other, it's a 90-degree angle because the water is one on top of the other. Maybe that's the biggest slope is a 90-degree angle, and maybe the waters won't halachically connect because it's on the slope. Others say no, a slope means if the water is running down a slope is a problem, but not if it's stationary water on a slope. So I follow the opinion that the Chabad mikveh is a kosher mikveh lechatchila, and in many communities, even though there is a big mikveh that many people use, which is not, it has some ideas of Chabad in them, but not a pure Chabad mikveh. Less people use it, but sometimes, and especially in these situations where, where the people are afraid of the virus. So I know there was a couple of women that I had a connection either with them directly or with their rabbi or rebbitzin, and we had them go to a mikveh that the water was changed on a regular basis. You see, at a certain mikveh, say some people want to be the first person to be there. I want to be the first person of the evening to go to the mikveh. But if you're the first person of the evening, that could mean you're the 400th person, because that water was sitting there for weeks already. If you have a mikveh that the water is changed on a regular basis, you can be the first, you can be the second, but you're still doing much better than the first of the night, because the first of the night could mean you're the 400th person. So together with help from Rebbitzin, and we were able to get people to be able to, again, it was in consultation with the doctor to see that it was, safe for the person, etc. And of course, the situation of the mikveh is very carefully done, spacing out people, etc. And we were able to, together with Rebbitzin and other people, to be able to have people who otherwise were afraid to go to the mikveh to be able to go to the mikveh even in this situation. Now, of course, every situation is different, and I'm not saying, and every situation has to be dealt with by the doctor and the rav in the discussion, and see what the best resources are for that person, or do we tell the person, and every situation is different, and that's but the fact that the Chabad has these mikvahos that are not, see, that Chabad mikveh that we were talking about, only for like 5 people go in a night. It's not like this big mikveh that has hundreds of people going. And even of the 5, we get the person to go in the first or maybe the second of the night. And it was able to allay, the fear of certain women who were, very fearful, and to go, and it definitely helped them out. But again, every situation is different, and every situation has to be dealt with the sensitivity for the women, for the halacha, and the multiple balancing of the sensitivities have to be. But this idea, and especially now the Chabad mikvahs, obviously with the proper upkeep. I'm not speaking about every single mikvah. I can't give you a general statement now. Anything we would have to speak to privately if anyone knows anyone who needs a recommendation in a very confidential manner of how to deal with their situation. But but there could be possibilities that could be helpful to people. And as I said, the whole idea of mikveh construction is to enable. See, we don't just do like the kalim mikveh, just keep the same body of water and just keep the kalim going and going and going, because as I said, the kalim won't complain, and they don't talk back, and they won't have any anger towards you. But you're dealing with people who are live human beings, then we have to be very sensitive and very careful about the situation. And another thing is, normally we assume the halacha is that if a person goes to the mikveh, so they can't take a bath or a shower after the mikveh until they have some type of intimacy with their husband. Because there was a fear in the time of Chazal that people would go to the mikveh and then they would go to the Mayim She'uvim bath, and they would say, oh, you have to do, it's a 2-step process. They won't realize that the first step process is the real mikveh. Now they're just going, there's a 2-step process. And then they'll say, let's forget the first step. Let's just do the second step. And they'll just do the Mayim She'uvim step, and they'll never go to the mikveh. So the same thing we say that you have to first go to the mikveh and then be some form of intimacy with the husband before they could shower or bathe. But some poskim say that's only if you shower or bathe after the mikveh at the mikveh premises. But if you do it at home, maybe not. Some of the opinion that it only applies to eating truma. So, but poskim have been, like Bari's mentioned, have been more lenient to allow women to bathe when they come home, to bathe first, to shower first before they have intimacy with their husbands because of this concern of the virus and etc. And part of the so that's the basic. Now there are a lot of nuances in how mikvos. So I'll give you the basic idea, but their mikvos now have many other things. So I'm going to continue on. If anyone wants to ask anything, I'll just stop. I'll pause briefly now. If anyone wants to clarify anything or ask anything, and then we'll continue on. Yeah, Dr. Schechter.
Thank you. It's interesting that people are checking sewage output for COVID-19 DNA through testing, looking for the its DNA, and they do this in Israel, also in Arizona and other places. Probably test a mikveh for COVID-19 content as well.
Right. I mean, they were checking anything in sewage. Yeah. I haven't heard of people, but I guess technically they could do that, and I don't know what they'll find, but okay, that's right.
And maybe a question.
You have to do some serious tracing.
Oh, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, then you'd have to do some serious tracing, if you do find it, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, then you have to, empty the water and then start again.
But then,
one time, one of my talmidim was a rav in a community, an out-of-town community, and there was a custodian in the community who meant well, and he saw there was a whole thing of dirty rainwater, and he wanted to be helpful. So what did he do? He emptied the rainwater. He thought that was dirty water, and so now they lost the mikveh. They lost their mikveh because without the rainwater, it's not going to help that you turn on the faucet. But you need a rainwater body to do the hashaka to. And then, so this custodian who was well-meaning, mamish, took away their mikveh by mistake. So they had to wait. Luckily, it rained a lot there till there was enough rain to fill up the part of the mikveh that has the rainwater, and then do a hashaka again. Yes.
I know before Pesach, some communities, I know specifically Baltimore, closed the Kalim mikvot.
Right.
And if what you're saying is it's why would they need to do that? My daughter spent Pesach for the first time not with us, for the first time in 37 years, and she had never made Pesach, so she had to go out and buy.
Right. We also I joined the club,
and she was told. So she was told the ruling would be when you buy the pots, say it's hefker, and you can use it on Pesach, and then when you're able to use, you go to the mikveh with the kalim, go to the kalim mikveh, then they say they're no longer hefker. But whatever, how exact procedure. But why do they have to close the kalim mikveh then?
Well, they closed the kalim mikveh for two. Not all communities, by the way, closed the kalim mikveh. There was some communities that did not close the Keilim Mikveh. That I don't want to discuss, which communities where. I'm not here to do that. Anything of a personal nature, I could discuss to you on a personal basis. That's why I didn't mention, which mikveh it's Rebbitzin. The Rebbitzin was not my Rebbitzin. It's a different Rebbitzin who recommended a certain mikveh to tell people to use. That I told you that we sent some people to. Not my wife, but another Rebbitzin of note.
But
And 1 second, and the thing is, there were two concerns. Some people were concerned, with just over the years, there are people coming in, and who knows what could be, because you're not gonna, in other words, the Keilim Mikveh is basically rainwater, and it's not going to be replenished overnight,
right?
Because they don't do hashaka with the. They just have.
But then you go wash the pots in boiling water, whatever.
Yeah, so that's what some people did, and they were.
Why would they?
The other concern was of, especially in the big Jewish communities, just people congregating there. It wasn't so much the mikveh per se, but if we keep the mikvahs open, especially of the Keilim mikvahs before Pesach, and the hustle bustle, and there was afraid of certain communities to have a place of congregation, and that was also a concern. And there were other communities that still had them open. Again, I don't like to, especially if we're on a public thing which is going to be put up online, I don't want to, I don't mention any particular names or things in that. And anyone who needs any guidance in anything specific, can contact me. Dr. Schechter and Rabbi Dallinger have my number, and I'd be happy to discuss any private need, but when we're talking in a public setting, which is going to be put online, so
that's fine.
Yeah, but I'd be happy to speak to you more. But that's the idea, that there were a lot of Keilim mikvahs were closed. But there were some that did remain open.
A question maybe about the nature of Mayim She'uvim, of drawn water as a prohibition. Does Rebbe have feelings about whether that's kind of rabbinic in nature or biblical or some common?
Right, there's a machlokas about that. Some hold that it's a psul d'oraisa, or it's a machlokas, as Rav Schechter pointed out in the poskim, whether it's a rabbinical psul or a Torah psul, but it's definitely a psul, and that's so something that has to be dealt with. Now, another very important part of the mikveh upkeep is that there shouldn't be a leak in the mikveh, because the whole point of a mikveh, if it's coming from rainwater, maybe it could be moving, but like if you go in the ocean, there's not a problem that the ocean is moving, because that's Mayan water. And when it's Mayan, it's spring water, that could be moving water. But once it's the Mayan is hufsak, or it's rainwater, it has to be in one location. It can't be leaking, and that sometimes happens, that you have a crack. That's why Reb Chaim Brisker, I think Rav Nachum Rosenberg pointed out from Reb Chaim Brisker, he liked a mikveh to be built on stilts. So this way you could look outside and you can see if there's a leak. If it's built in the ground, it's hard to notice whether there's a leak, and it has to be a leak that's noticeable. What's called a zechila hanikaris, and that's one of the main upkeeps of a mikveh, is to make sure the mikveh is not leaking. it's called Zchila Hanikeres, if it's noticeable, the leak. And the question is, where do you look to see if it's noticed from the top, from the side? That's a whole discussion of Zchila Hanikeres, but that's an important part of mikveh construction. But a mikveh is very important to have an upkeep of the mikveh. Just like anything, like an eruv needs an upkeep, a mikveh needs an upkeep, and it could be a wonderful mikveh that was created years ago, but it has to have because you make sure maybe now there's a crack, and and most mikvahs are not built on stilts, so a lot of times there can be a crack in the mikveh, and there could be some type of problem, and it wouldn't necessarily be noticeable. So it's always important, to bring in somebody periodically to make sure that there's a proper upkeep of the mikveh, and that's the idea that it shouldn't be. But as I said, it was a tremendous challenge and tremendous stress that people have, in this situation we're in now, specifically regarding the mikveh. Kalim is one avenue, and the other avenue is, people themselves. And as I said, there are ways of dealing with all these problems, not to get overly stressed, and to speak to someone. I'd be happy to speak to anyone who would like personal advice regarding how to deal with this, because it's a very important avenue. I mean, feel of people, and feel of Kalim was also a very important halacha as well. For years, there was people would just were mako, not mako. It's not a mako means that there's a leniency. They just weren't observing it. Certain things just became forgotten. That I can tell you stories again. I'll tell you a story that happened once in Yerushalayim, that on a Friday night, that I told you that they empty the mikveh by suctioning out. You plug it back up, and then you suction out the it's like a vacuum that's suctioning out the water. And if the water is being suctioned out while people are going, then it's no good, because that's like the biggest leak that you could have, having the water being suctioned out, according to many opinions. So they noticed that in the middle of the Friday night tevilah, that the water was being suctioned out as people were going to the mikveh. How did that happen? Rav Nachman Rosenberg said there's a theory that maybe, in Yerushalayim they're full of cats. Maybe a cat put his foot on the thing that causes the machine to suction out, and that was so they went with cars around the different neighborhoods in Yerushalayim, and they made an announcement in a sanua way to get people to go back to the mikveh, because it could be that there was a zchila happening while they were going. That's a whole discussion of that. And mikvahs have to be constructed properly, with a proper, making sure the hashaka is done properly. There was a mikveh that was once made in this way, that the way that the construction of the hole, that the two waters didn't meet, and the two waters didn't meet. Then for all those years, people were going just into the tap water that didn't have proper hashaka. And what's interesting is it's not only the women who vanida, people who converted with that mikveh, the whole conversion. Those people who converted, some of them weren't even alive anymore. So you could have, I've heard these stories. So that's why it's an important investment to make sure that the community's mikveh is not only good, but it's a proper upkeep, and in this generation, a proper hygiene, and especially forget this generation, but there are times we're now where the people, have to be careful what they touch and this and that. It has to be done in a way with proper way of cleaning, disinfecting, whatever needs to be, with a proper mumche in the mikvos to make sure that everything is done that we possibly could do to maintain the hygiene and maintain the safety of anyone who's going there, and to deal with it in a very proper, halakhically sensitive to the halakha and sensitive to the needs of the clientele who are using the mikveh. So when Rabbi Dallinger was asking me what I should speak about, and these questions were coming in, so I thought this would be a interesting topic. I would like to next week continue on this topic. I also speak about the laws of chatzitza. If a woman has a cast, a woman has a thing, and how to deal with those topics, because those are also very important topics. And the mikveh is the Tara of Klal Yisrael, so it's something of great importance, and we want to make sure that if a person for some reason can't go because of health reasons, okay, whatever has to be dealt with. But a mikveh, the Tara of a mikveh cannot be replaced by taking a shower or something like that. I mean, for men, it's a different story. The concept of a men's mikveh is a mikveh that's only mayim she'uvim. It's tap water, but it's tap water without a hashaka, and that's good for the men's mikveh. Even though men's Rav Soloveitchik, as Rabbi Baruch pointed out, wanted men to go for an erev Yom Kippur to a real mikveh that would give them the proper tara for Yom Kippur. Do you see each other? Is anyone here?
We just lost the video, but we just lost it about 1 second ago, but we still hear you
Okay.
loud and clear.
Okay, so these are things, Bez Hashem, for next week we'll talk about. I wanted to thank the Moradasra again, Rabbi Dallinger, for inviting me, Rabbi Dr. and Mrs. Schechter, always who are there to help sponsor, and they're the pillars of the community, and all the various people. And I told Dr. Schechter earlier, I just missed the Shabbos hospitality that I'm looking forward to for next year, and because you can't, we can have the share over Zoom, which is beautiful, and I was able to see many people's faces, but being together in the shul and eating together and singing Zmiras together, that we can't replace. So I thank you all for coming. And as I said, if anyone needs to discuss anything, who knows people who need some guidance in this area, I'd be happy to do whatever I can to help anyone in this area. And I want to thank you, wish you a good night, a good week. And the Bez Hashem next week, we should continue on these inyanim. Thank you again, Rabbi Dallinger, Dr. and Mrs. Schechter, and the rest of the community.
Rabbi Simon, thank you. The pleasure has been exclusively ours, and we're grateful. And like Rabbi Simon said, if anyone needs to or wants to discuss with him, please don't hesitate to contact us, and we'll get you in touch with Rabbi Simon. He always responds almost immediately to questions. And we're grateful for that and for this talk. And we'll be back next week, I think around 8:30 probably.
Okay.
Same Zoom channel, if that works. But we'll be
Okay.
in touch, and we'll also post a recording with Rebbe's permission of this talk on our YouTube channel. If it's okay, maybe we'll try and put it up on YU Torah as well.
Yeah, I'll put it on the YU Torah. I'll send it to YU Torah right away.
Wonderful. So thank you, everyone. So you have multiple ways to hear this or share it, and with gratitude, everyone should remember, if they haven't yet, count the Omer. And
Okay. Be well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.